database that things like I could hack into the database and get Adam's DNA profile, and that would tell me that he was susceptible to cancer or some other sort of disease, and then I could on-sell it to insurance companies. And we hear all sorts of myths like that. I mean, the reality, of course, is that the database itself has no personal information, no identifying information on it whatsoever. If you imagine millions of barcodes or thousands of barcodes spinning around, when there is a match, the system itself simply sends a message to the jurisdiction that put the profile on, and the jurisdiction that it matched against, sends a message to each saying, you guys might want to talk to each other about this barcode. And the job of the National DNA Database is simply finished right then and there. It uses web-based technology to provide the application to a distributed user base. It is, of course, all the data on it is encrypted, and as I said, there are no personal identifiers on the database whatsoever. In fact, police officers don't even have access to the system because they can't interpret it, so access is actually limited to the forensic laboratories in each of the jurisdictions. The DNA, of course, is DNA profiling and kinship matching, a very, very powerful tool that enables us to compare DNA profiles to determine if an unknown deceased person is biologically related to a known family member. This is the technologies that we used after the Bali bombings of 2002, after the Asian tsunami, and most recently following the tragic Victorian bushfires, to be able to identify victims of all of those tragic circumstances. It could, of course, also potentially assist in missing persons cases when an unknown deceased person is found many years after the person disappeared, and we're able to obtain a toothbrush or hair or whatever to then be able to do a comparison later on. Next, we have the National Police Reference System. This is an electronic system which brokers information between state and territory police services, with giving them instant access to comprehensive information about persons of interest. This system has a user base of around about 55,000 operational police, and as it says there, last year 36 million transactions were conducted over this system. This is a system where police officers pull up people right around the country every day. They do checks, and it's via this system that they find out information about persons of interest. What information is on the National Police Reference System? You can see there the 11 data sets or 11 involvements or reasons why somebody would be on the National Police Reference System. You don't have to be a criminal to be on the National Police Reference System, obviously missing persons, firearms licence holders, and so on. We expect that in time the data sets will increase, and in fact we have some projects going to the CrimTrac board at the moment around enhancements or additional data, which would include identification of members of organised crime groups and outlaw motorcycle gangs and so on. So whether they're walking the beat, travelling in the car or at their desktops, operational police can now access comprehensive information from other jurisdictions and get a nationwide view of a person of interest. And of course, as I mentioned in the fingerprint front, most exciting of the recent developments has been the rollout of handheld devices which have these National Police Reference System access. So in the old days we used to have to go back to the police station, then we thought it was good when we had an in-car computer. Well, now with these small PDA type devices we can take it out in the field and have immediate access. I'll just quickly simulate access to the system. The records are real. I've just changed the names to protect the guilty. Once the user has successfully logged into the system, they'll be presented with a person search page, and they can choose then to search a jurisdiction or a national search, and of course the national search is the default search. So in this example we're searching on Michael Corleone, who is listed as being missing or an escapee. We have pretty sophisticated name matching software, which will bring up a hit list of the closest matches. And as we can see there, 4 of our jurisdictions have contributed records in relation to this person of interest. And you can see on the right-hand side there, warnings, warrants, orders missing. They're of course the categories that the police commissioners have agreed to share nationally. So I can then go into any particular jurisdiction's holdings, or I can bring up the national. You'll see straight away it'll bring up any warnings in relation to an individual, and it'll bring up a chronology of photographs which may be available of the individual. At the moment, the photographs that we have in there are the photographs which are processed, which are obtained when people are processed through watch houses. And just as an example of the richness of the information, this record's about a missing person, and prior to the National Police Reference System, which was rolled out across the country, we completed the rollout just last year. Prior to that, if you had a missing person in Australia and they went missing from one jurisdiction and were found in another, on our old capability, the National Names Index, the only information you would find if you did a national search was the very top line there, the fact that the person was reported missing. Now, of course, with the National Police Reference System, we get all this very rich data about when and where they went missing, what were they wearing, what were they carrying, what was their mental state as per the person who reported them missing, and so on. So, again, as I mentioned before, there's a chronology of photographs, and establishing obviously a person's identity is critical, and the photo service allows us to confirm a person's identity at a glance. So a pretty powerful tool that's part of the NPRS. Additional data, as I mentioned before, we have a flexible platform which is allowing us to enhance by adding additional involvements. These are some of the ones that we are looking at now. There's a recent inclusion of additional data about persons of interest associations to help identify whether they are affiliated with outlaw motorcycle gangs. Our missing persons data is being enhanced to include details such as passport numbers, next of kin details, etc. As well as this, now we're adding an upgrade which will include information about known arsonists, and this is intended to assist in the national identification of known bushfire arsonists. But a classic example of where do we need a separate database for arsonists? No, we don't. Being an arsonist is simply an involvement, another association, which can be added to this. Vehicles, we're currently working on a project that will allow us to integrate existing vehicle and driver's licence information into the National Police Reference System, and this will give us give police a single user interface to access information about persons of interest and vehicles of interest. Firearms, we're developing a new capability at the moment which will address inconsistencies in the methods for identifying and recording firearms and reduce the potential for registration mistakes. In 2008, police ministers recommended the development of a national firearms identification database which provides for a national standard for firearms identification. So what that will look like is something like a sort of a Wikipedia, if you like, of firearms, or a dictionary of firearms. It'll be a web-based reference tool which will deliver an intuitive sort of search service, similar to a sort of Google-type functionality, and search results will provide lists of matches in descending order against the search criteria. It'll bring up photographs and so on, and enable registration agencies, gun licensing groups and so on to be able to actually ensure that we are describing firearms in a consistent manner. Child protection. We have a couple of initiatives on the child protection front. ANCOR is our National Child Offender System. The National Child Offender System is a web-based system designed to assist police to register, case manage and share mandatory information about registrable persons as required through legislation. We maintain the system for use by authorised police officers, and it assists police to monitor the movements of convicted offenders across states and territories. Another capability that we're in the process of rolling out at the moment is the child exploitation tracking system. It's a project that was developed with the AFP and the Queensland Police. This will help police more effectively identify perpetrators of offences against children and rescue victims of child exploitation. And what it will actually have is it will actually host what is called the National Victims Image Library. So if I give you an example, in the ACT just earlier this year, a search warrant was executed at a gentleman's house. He had about 5 hard drives with about 6 million pornographic images, or images of child exploitation. And of course, normally each image has got to be gone through by investigators, which has a significant psychological toll on investigators. Each image has got to be categorised in accordance with the sort of pornography that it actually represents. And of course, there is the issue of trying to identify new victims and new offenders. This software in this National Victims Image Library will do that for us. We would just load the 5 million images in, and the system will spit out any new images. And of course, with child exploitation, what we're seeing is the same images going around the world. This will actually enable us to very, very quickly be able to identify new victims and new offenders. So, quite an exciting project. Of course, first off, we'll build it as a national capability, and then ultimately, obviously, we would want to be able to have some way of connecting with similar databases internationally.